Yep.
Everybody, welcome to episode 4 of Midnight Snacks. My name is Jerry. I'm joined today by my fearless counterpart, Alex, and today we're going to be
Hello.
discussing a 80s classic, The Lost Boys. To give us a little bit about what it is and some summary of the movie, here's Alex.
Thank you, Jerry. Um, so I've been looking forward to this one for a few weeks, but it's been interesting. It's been interesting of making our way towards the Lost Boys because we've been doing horror films roughly. I think they're horror. Yeah, some of them are horror-ish. Every week so far in the month of October. Are you have you been enjoying doing a lot of horror?
I have. I mean, I don't know if they're strict horror. I don't know if Beetlejuice and Hocus Pocus are, but they're definitely Halloweeny movies, and I'm here
Right.
for
Yeah. I
Halloweeny.
guess you're
Yep.
right. You're right.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've seen The Lost Boys. I watched it for the pod, so I have a lot of thoughts about it. But even this, I don't think I would consider straight horror.
No, absolutely
I
not.
think this is a genre blending movie for sure.
Great. So let's dive into The Lost Boys.
Yep.
This week's movie is The Lost Boys, released on July 31st, 1987. The Lost Boys follows brothers Michael and Sam, who move to a California town of Santa Carla and discover that it is plagued by a gang of teenage vampires. As they confront the supernatural threat, they must navigate their own relationships and the allure of the dark side. The Lost Boys stars Jason Patric, Kiefer Sutherland, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Jamie Gertz, and Diane Wiest. Okay. So, Jerry, what did you think of The Lost Boys since it's your first time watching it?
I have a lot of thoughts. I get this movie confused with The Outsiders a lot.
Okay.
And when we first talked about it, I thought we were thinking of that movie. I think we talked about like Rob Lowe and Tom Cruise, and I'm like, what? But then I realized we were watching the vampire movie.
Mhm. Funny.
To my earlier point, I think it's a comedy and a
Mhm.
horror movie. I was not prepared for that. I thought it was going to be a straight like 80s kind of thriller maybe.
Mhm.
I was not ready for like the exploding toilet scene at the end there and like
Yep.
all of the like more on the nose things. But I really enjoyed it. I love the title of the movie, and I love that it kind of harkens back to like Peter Pan and
Yep.
how boys and vampires never grow up. And so I think that
Right.
that mixing of the metaphor was super great. I got some like Goonie vibes from it, especially that cave that they
Their
go
cave.
into in
Yeah.
their lair and stuff like that. So that was really cool. Kind of like a kid's pad. You know, they were all adults, really. They were adult men, kind of, but it still felt kind of like where you would want to hang out when you were a kid.
You mean like a crypt, like
Yeah.
this like cool cavern crypt with like a bunch of destroyed like metal
I mean, you give me
railings.
a fallen chandelier and I am on board.
Very Phantom of the Opera view.
Yeah. I loved Jason Patrick. I mean,
I mean,
whoa.
yeah,
Okay.
smoke show,
Beautiful
Jason
boy.
Patrick.
Beautiful boy. Have never seen him in anything that I can think of. Had never seen him in this, obviously. But he gets a gold star for me for carrying that movie. Um, I love the cast. I love the ensemble. I recognize a lot of people from this movie, from other things I love, like
Mhm.
Jamie Gertz from Twister, Kiefer from Everything.
Everything.
Richard Gilmore ends up being in this movie, and he dates Diane Wiest. So there's a lot. It's a great ensemble cast, and I think what I loved about the movie is that it feels like that, right? It's not
Right.
just one guy's movie. It's not one kid's movie. It's literally, it's got so many moving parts that it makes it feel like an ensemble cast. Um, and I have to tell you, I love the creepy carnival Santa Clara, that whole thing was like at the beginning, especially because they give you so many snapshots of crazy crap that's happening. It puts you in the mood immediately for the movie. So that was really cool. I've got a fun fact about it, which is not really all that fun, but apparently it was filmed in Santa Cruz, which was considered at the time the murder capital of the world.
Wait, so that was
Because
real?
the town itself is not real, but Santa Cruz is real.
Santa Cruz was actually the murder capital of the world.
Right. Between
Interesting.
1970 and 1973, 28 murders happened there. So, there was a lot of fervent atmosphere, I think, permeating a lot of where they were filming. So, yeah, it was good. I have some negative thoughts, but what tell me about your relationship with this movie.
Okay, so The Lost Boys. I think growing up, it was one of these movies where I knew of how kind of famous it was, and they played it on TV a lot. It was always on TV, and I remember watching it and just thinking how cool everything seemed. Like, I don't think I was ever genuinely afraid of anything by it, but I still know that when I was a kid, I would watch it, but I didn't really absorb to it. It took me a really long time being like a fan of horror and like kind of spooky stuff to eventually kind of adopt the Lost Boys as like part of my identity. And I think that definitely happened maybe around my teen years, like my tweens to teens. And it's because the Lost Boys, and this is something I noticed while watching it. And I mean, I've always known this because it gets referenced quite a bit, but while you're watching it, and again, like I've mentioned, when we're trying to be a little analytical, I find myself noticing certain things that maybe before I would not call out almost immediately.
Yeah.
But it basically is kind of like, I don't want to say the first of a genre, because I know you can always find something else, but I tried really hard to find other films during that time period of 1987 that kind of strike the genre combination that The Lost Boys is doing. That horror comedy, it's very much a teen film. The script is nowhere near perfect. The script very much reeks of a teen, kind of like a popcorn movie. It's 100% a popcorn movie. It knows what it is. It knows what it is. And I think, and this is something I think I've mentioned about other stuff, it's that a lot of these movies, they start out as just that thing that they are. They know exactly what they are. And because they become these hits and these franchises, we then have to create like this whole like weight. You're now giving these films and like this narrative a weight that was never there before. So it's like, I feel like the same thing kind of happens with The Lost Boys, where, The Lost Boys doesn't have a lot of like, you don't get to know too much about Michael. You don't get to know too much about any of them. It's more about this exact that's just happening to them, and less about you really getting to know the characters and like getting this like really great character piece out of them. So that being said, I love this genre, and it continuously gets compared to, and originally when we were talking about watching this movie, I said maybe we should do a double feature of this and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, which you've never seen, because Joss Whedon, very famously, when Buffy the Vampire Slayer first came out, and in the years after when he retooled it into a TV show, he basically said that he stole, or rather co-opted, all of the tone for Buffy from The Lost Boys. And it very much is that. It very much is this mixing of like quippy dialogue and, references to pop culture, but then every character kind of has something kind of very current to say, and they're all part of that ensemble, and like they're talking about big topics like living forever and like never being able to die and vampirism, but at the same time it's within this lens of like modern pop culture kind of like aesthetics and how teens nowadays will communicate. So I love that about it. I love that it's like this movie that you can just watch at any time and like just enjoy it. I think that's what kind of sets it apart from some other types of horror films or horror comedies, where it's like you kind of have to be in the mood for certain things. Like for example, Monster Squad. I love Monster Squad, but I kind of got to be in the mood for Monster Squad.
I get
Where
that.
it's like I feel like if Lost Boys is on, it's almost like you're just watching like an extended like MTV music video or something. It's
Yeah.
you know, but I really love this movie just because aesthetics alone, it's just so good.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if this is the kind of movie that I would pop in just to, or have on. I would actually be more inclined to sit through Monster Squad than this. I think this movie was definitely tongue-in-cheek for kids,
mhm,
but at the same time, like there were some really heavy concepts that were coming
mhm,
across in this movie, right? Like I think the teen alienation of the Michael character was definitely something very prominent in the 80s and to this day, right? Like I think you feel very isolated from your family. I think in every movie, right? They move to a new town, so it's like they don't know where they fit in this new town, and that was definitely what he was going through. And then the added kind of allegorical thing, right, where he becomes addicted to drinking this blood, and so now there's like this addiction level or
right.
this layer of you are lonely, you feel alone, you're by yourself, and then you find these group of people who are bad influences on you. So there's a lot there. Like it's very, very meaty when it comes to, but it doesn't pound you over the head with it, right? It's not a message. It's not like they're not drilling it into you, but it's definitely there in the subtext.
And it all happens very fast. Like, you know what I mean? Like I tried to pay attention to see how long, if the movie gives you any clear indication of how long the actual story is while the span of the movie's happening. And I don't think you can really piece it together. Like you could sit there and think that it's a few days. You could maybe find ways to make an argument that it might be a week or two. But you don't really ever know, but it just happens really quickly. And I do like how Joel Schumacher and the writing team on it, they very cleverly played around with vampire lore to be able to have Michael be a vampire while not actually dying and having the opportunity to, remain human
Right.
by the end of the film. This might be one of the only examples, like off the top of my head, this might be one of the only examples where I know of a character exhibiting the powers of a vampire and the traits of a vampire from merely drinking vampire blood, not from being
Bitten.
bitten and transformed permanently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's what they were going for, right? They were trying to move away, I think, from the more traditional role of the vampire and kind of bring it into the 80s and everything that was kind of going on then.
And they kept also the losing of your reflection. Like there's that scene where Michael, look, you don't have a reflection. And this was, I think, so this movie also famously, like the vampire, when they vamp out,
The brows,
the vamp face,
yeah,
which Buffy the Vampire Slayer completely took that. Like we could argue that Lost Boys invented that, maybe popularized it. Buffy then made it like the standard for vampire makeup. And then, the rest is history, because at that point, every other show is now using a lot of those tricks. I noticed too, and I'm going to keep bringing up Buffy, but the lair the lair that they're in that movie looks identical, not identical, but there's a lair in the first season of Buffy for the character, the Master, that's a sunken graveyard with like a bunch of things kind of growing out of, like, it's a cave and there's a
Okay.
bunch of like different items. While I was watching The Lost Boys this time, I'm like, okay, Joss Whedon even decided to make the Master's lair look like the lair in The Lost
Interesting.
Boys. The cast. So this has the Coreys in
It
it.
does have the Coreys.
Did you
I
enjoy
have
the
a favorite
Coreys?
Corey.
I mean, it's Corey Haim.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not Corey Haim. It's Corey Feldman.
No. I loved the other Corey in this. I think he played a role very similar to his role in Stand By Me. And maybe he was just kind of pigeonholed into that, to his detriment, I guess. I'm sure he didn't love that. But I love him in that. I love when he's like this, like, leader of the pack, this little militant kid who kind of knows stuff, but really doesn't know anything, kind of kid. And the fact that they gave him a brother who looked nothing like him, bless them. And they were the kind of, the Van Helsings of this world, was
Yes.
super cool. There's a line where they're like, oh, a vampire comic could save your life. Come on, that's
Vampire.
great.
Oh yeah, and then the parents own the comic book shop, and the parents never even wake up. They're
Yeah.
sleeping in the comic book store the whole time, and
Yeah.
they're hippies.
Yeah.
I
loved him in that.
Can we also talk about how this town? Like, I just remember while I was watching it, I'm like, I miss the '80s, man. Like, I mean, obviously, I was only like very, very young in the '80s, so I never got to experience this. But they have a boardwalk, with a muscular
You can say it.
wrestler
Yeah.
style dude
Yeah.
playing saxophone to people raging, and then you have this 24-hour comic book store. This 24-hour comic book store. It's just, the '80s were the time when that kind of stuff could happen. You could have 24-hour comic book stores.
I guess I
On
think a lot
boardwalks.
of it was also like super, super heightened for this movie because I think everything was at the extreme. But when that Muscle Queen came out with a saxophone playing in the middle of his concert, I had to take a pause and like go get a soda, come back, reevaluate my life. But that's Joel Schumacher, right? Like he does things like that just make you raise an eyebrow, is a little bit it's a queer element that he just kind of infuses and then he kind of takes it back, which is why I love him and why I appreciate so much of his filmmaking.
He's oddly always kind of on the pulse a little bit of like what he can do, you know what I mean, to kind of very covertly put himself out
Drop
there,
it
but
in
also
there.
at the same time, through this movie that he's doing, still exhibit a form of sexuality without being overt at all. And I did like the homoerotic kind of tones that was going on between. The cool thing about that is that you can't avoid that, right? Like you can't avoid the homoerotic undertones of vampirism.
Yeah.
And like this idea of like one male vampire sparing another one and kind of creating this like inner circle of people that you changed into vampires.
Well, absolutely. And then you put them in tight jeans and you rizz up their hair and the mullet, and then you've got a pack of 4 kids, who could either be, your vampire dads, or they could be in a rock band. It just
was it just me, or was David Kiefer Sutherland's character almost more attracted to Michael than he was to Star?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like at the beginning, you see David with Star, but then almost immediately she starts getting interested in Michael, and then
who wouldn't be? I mean, no shade to Jamie, but like, I mean, the boy was beautiful. As soon as I saw him, I thought, I hope that this is the main character because he needs to be in every shot of this movie, and he was. I was very happy with that.
We're gonna need to do a speed double feature
Okay.
with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. And the unfortunate reason why we have to do a double feature is because Speed 2, Keanu Reeves chose not to return for it.
Is that the cruise ship? They're on a cruise ship?
Yeah, cruise control. And the person who took over is Jason Patrick.
Oh, okay.
Which is
I've never seen it, but I am willing to look into it.
I haven't seen it since it was released.
Cruise control.
Speed 2 cruise control.
Poor Sandy.
Poor Sandra Bullock.
No, not poor Sandy. She got a big check out of that, I'm sure. Poor nothing.
She did. She did. I think she said she regretted doing it.
Well,
I mean, of course.
It wouldn't.
So then I also did you like the soundtrack?
You know, I didn't pay too much attention to the soundtrack this time. It felt very rock heavy, and I guess that's all I can really say about it. I didn't pay too much. I was so distracted by that opening sequence of the carnival and all that stuff. And then this kid Jason shows up, and I'm like googly eyes. So I was not really, my thinking hat was not on throughout this movie for sure.
Yeah, the big song from this movie is the Cry Little Sister one that they play a lot in the movie. I remember when I was a kid, the song bothered me. I don't know why. And I mean, I've always been into rock, but for some reason, it's just when I was a kid, I could not. It took me really when I was a teen to start appreciating whatever the movie was selling. I think that's when I really remember getting the DVD and like sitting and being like, wait, why is it taking me so long to fall in love with this?
Yeah.
But yeah, it just did.
I will say, go ahead.
Fun fact, the Santa Carla was also used in the movie Us.
Oh.
Yeah, I recognized that almost immediately while watching the movie Us. When I saw the movie Us.
The Nyong'o movie?
Yeah, the Jordan Peele one.
Okay.
Yeah, so that the boardwalk at the beginning where, the little girl wanders away and all that. Yeah. That's the same boardwalk from The Lost Boys.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Peele intentionally did that. He intentionally chose that one. And then the same way that, not to that movie, but he likes referencing quite a few things. In that one, there's a whole part where down to the camera angle, he references Jaws.
Okay.
Which is also a really good one. So fun story about the Lost Boys. I read a few years ago. So the WB, and the CW is no longer owned by WB, but when it was for like the last, forever, they have been trying to get a Lost Boys TV show off the ground, like a teen drama off the ground about the Lost Boys for a good, maybe almost a decade. It finally died out. They're no longer trying to do it. But when it got very, very close to being greenlit, the pilot script that was going to be greenlit made it out online, and I read it because I was like, I'm curious what they do here. And it was as cliche as you can expect it would be. It was just your another run-of-the-mill kind of Vampire Diaries, Buffy, Supernatural-esque clone.
Yeah.
Making the references to whatever's current and modern. The twist on that one is that they think that they killed David in the very first episode. In the very first episode, by the end of the pilot, they killed David, and they think they've killed like the quote unquote master. But in actuality, the master ends up being Star.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I was like, I was just bothered by it. I was like, this is like, I can already see a writer being in a writer's room or something and being like, let me subvert expectations. Let me make Star the real big bad. And it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Some things are okay just being a movie. Just like let's just leave this little jewel of a movie that we have alone in its own world. To your
Tell
point,
that to
right? We don't
Hollywood.
know
Tell
we
that,
don't know anything about the characters. It's a little snapshot of 1 or 2
right.
nights. That's fine. I don't need the world to be built out, like I'm in and I'm out. Good enough for me.
I especially love how this movie's shot. Like it's just also, again, it's, I guess now whenever I rewatch like Joel Schumacher movies, I always kind of like look at for the Joel Schumacher isms, I guess,
Yep.
like his signature kind of flair. And he really liked to make things really over the top. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like he really wanted like the vision, like he wanted the visuals to extend whatever it was that the story was trying to give you. Like the story was trying to give you something very fantasy like in terms of like making this experience of being a teenager and becoming a vampire and kind of, going out and risking your life every night. He chose to really commit and to show that in really cool ways.
Yeah.
Like the
Well,
scene hanging underneath the,
yeah, that was cool.
that
I
was a
think that's
cool
the
one.
shot. Yeah, that's the
That's a
shot of
cool
the.
one.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I agree with your take on Joel Schumacher. He definitely makes the implicit explicit in his sets and in the way that he places his characters. Sometimes not to such great, results. I'm thinking of the scene in Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's Mr. Freeze and like there's like icicles all over the museum, and I'm like, this is a little too much. Like we are too deep. We're too deep.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it in this movie, and you feel like you're right there with them. And a part of the conversation that you and I have had ongoing is how we miss sets and how we miss
Right.
like
Right.
putting actors in the physical spaces where they are. And it just adds so much richness to a scene. And it, you take away whatever you take away from the acting and from the characters in the story, but sometimes what leaves you is just the feeling of the sets and stuff like that. And you definitely get that from this movie. It's very vibey.
Yeah, and it's and that's a thing too about a lot of the movies that we've reviewed and we'll probably continue to review because of the time period when they were made. They have that very tangible, and I've said this before, like movies used to feel very tangible to me. Something about them just felt like they were existing in this same space
Yes.
on Earth that I exist in. I saw someone mention recently. This is a little bit of a controversial take. They're not excited for the Wicked movie.
They're not excited for what?
Did you lose me?
Yep, I think I did. Oh, I can hear you now.
Wicked, the movie Wicked.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So, and what they were saying was that in very funny way, they were like, "Why does everything got to look like that now?" And then the person's like, "What do you mean like that?" And she's like, "Everything just looks like that. Like it's nothing can just a thing anymore. Like now it has to look like I'm in a video game. Like why does Wicked have to be spinning me around in like this crazy train through the middle of like Oz and like that's like why does it need to look like that?" And I kind of feel the same way. Not particularly specific about Wicked, although we'll get to that one eventually. Yeah. But I just mean that like nothing feels tangible anymore.
Yeah, agreed. I do feel that way about Wicked. The look of it doesn't entice me at all. I think a good example of doing it correctly in modern times is the Barbie movie. And the fact that that's not in my world, right? I'm not thinking that. But the fact that everything was a set, they were there, right? Everything was, you could touch it. They opened that ambulance and like all the, the things come out. It harkens back to this era of movie making, right? Where they built things and they had the actors interacting with their surroundings. And I do miss that. I don't think we get enough of that really. Beetlejuice 2 did that a little bit. So that, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, there's still some directors that make a point of kind of creating the spaces that let their movies really kind of like exist in multiple and feeling like you could be there with them as opposed to it existing on like very clearly they're on a green screen.
Yeah.
So the Lost Boys in the house, I love the house scene, or just like I love the house, like the house set is just
Yeah.
fantastic. I especially like the part where all the motorcycles are riding around the house and they're causing all this wind. I was like, I like how all the vampires seem to have like a wind machine.
Yeah. Yeah. That was cool. And then they disappeared.
Right. Then when they open the door, it's all gone. I'm like, that is very similar to how we were referencing some usage of magic in the craft. That it's like it's clearly happening, but they're not like going overboard in terms of trying to really show it
Absolutely.
or explain it.
Yeah.
Like
It's
you
more
just
about the
know.
feeling, it's more about the cause of what's happening than seeing what is happening. And sometimes that's scarier, right? That leans into that more
Yeah,
horror, scary
yeah,
element where you don't know what's causing it. You don't know how many people are out there. All you know is the reaction that the kids inside the house are having to that situation.
yeah.
And I would argue that that's better filmmaking.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Like
I
the
think
fact that
about
you don't
like,
have to see the character,
right,
like a lesser filmmaker would have shown you the vampires outside
right.
circling the house.
As I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about another movie, not horror related, but kind of, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Hmm.
There's a scene where the little kid gets abducted and the mom is in the house and you don't know what's going on. You've not seen the aliens. You don't even know if it is aliens, but literally there's just lights outside. Things are going off. Screws are coming up from the
Yep.
floorboards. His toys start clanging and stuff like that. And all of a sudden he gets sucked up through the dog door. And like you are at the edge of your seat in that entire scene because it's just what's going on. You don't know what's causing it. It's just you're seeing the reaction to it. And I
Right. Like,
think that what they were doing in The Lost Boys kind of harkens back to a little bit of that.
and it's also too smart in terms of how you use the budget. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, some of these really great movies that pull off some really iconic scenes, it's usually because the director is stretching their budget and they're figuring out other ways to get across what the script requires without relying on spending more money on,
Yeah.
special effects or something. And
Yeah.
that always ends up kind of creating an opportunity for some special scenes. I think in this one too, he does reference Salem's Lot a little bit, um, with the Michael turning into a vampire and Sam kind of confronting him about it. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can I tell you what my favorite scene was in the movie?
of course, yeah, go for it.
It's not consequential, I think, or actually maybe it is. I don't know, but it's the scene where one of the Corys is taking a bath, and the
Yes.
kid is going to attack his brother because he's now consumed by this feeling, this rage or whatever. And the dog attacks the brother and basically saves the brother, and he gets like a big cut or that big bite in his hand. And the kid is underwater, so he's not really understanding what's going on or seeing what's going on. That was filmed to perfection.
Yep.
The turning point, I think, for the brother is that, and then the little brother understands what's going on, so it's a moment of revelation. I rewound that part. I'm like, I need to see that again. Like that was absolutely fantastic. Oh, I can't hear you again.
That scene is
Oh,
great.
no, I got you.
Okay. Yeah, my tech has been giving me some weird issues today, but it's
That's
fine.
right.
So justice for Nanook. Nanook is the name of the dog.
Yeah, yeah.
We love Nanook.
I'm glad he survived.
I always love when Sam's like, Michael, what did you do to Nanook? Why did Nanook bite you, Michael? I always thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
I like the grandfather and all his like crazy eccentric stuff he has in the house.
Was he a taxidermist?
I don't know if he was licensed as a taxidermist, but
Well,
he did
what was that room? Was
taxidermy.
that room was that right?
Absolutely, yeah. No,
Okay,
so he did do taxidermy. Whether or not he did it as a profession
sure.
for extra coins,
There,
maybe he
there.
did because that. Although at one point I think he has a date, and he's taking the date a taxidermied animal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And he gives the kid a beaver or something like that. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just, from the glimpses of the room, I could never really make out what was in there. But it just adds, I think, some color to, a very sideline character.
I so okay. Wait, do you you know the little wasn't the little kid kind of strange? The little vampire Lanny is his name Lanny?
I
Like
don't know.
what?
Yeah.
I don't. I would love to understand what the point of that was.
I think he is. I think his point was really being on the milk carton, right? To be a living, breathing example of kids that are being missing and stuff like that. And in his case, he wasn't killed. He was just in
Like,
this like vampire gang.
well, but he was. I'm guessing he. Yeah, they also fed him the blood, so
Yeah,
he was like a half vampire,
yeah, yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Um, I liked. I didn't. I like all the use of blood in the movie, like the craziness. I think you mentioned some of that earlier, like with all the crazy blood coming out of like the different parts of the house.
Yeah, I didn't care for that too much. I'm just like, okay, we are jumping the shark at this point. Like
Yeah, I love
it's
it.
when that toilet exploded, I even wrote it down. I'm like, holy cow.
And that those types of like qualities are to me what kind of like push it into more cult kind of more like kind of cult status. Like the when you're able to mix some of the other kind of tones that you're doing, and then you're gonna throw in like a bunch of like
Yeah,
nonsensical like horror blood. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're priming yourself for some cult status with it.
yeah. And at one point, somebody's like, "Oh, we're the blood sucking Brady Bunch," and I thought, "Oh boy, we we are going downhill quick here." But
Aw.
so I guess my point is, I didn't really care for the end of the movie too much. I mean, I like the plot twist with like
Mhm.
who the actual big bad was and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Did you see that
Um,
coming?
um, I think I did. I think what
Okay.
threw me was the dinner scene where nothing happened, like a garlic and all that stuff. It did, and then they're like, "Oh, well, if you invite me in, none of that affects me." I think that was a Joel Schumacherism.
Right. The rejiggering of the floor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that threw me a little bit, but I guess that was the point. Yeah, I think I loved most of the movie. I think the end when it becomes like this, like almost Home Alone, like we're gonna defend this house. That really was just kind of like a little bit over the top, but apparently that's what you love. So I guess we're a house divided on this one.
I mean, look, the movie is nowhere near perfect. It's just a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun to have it on. And I mean, it's really nice to look at. Like everyone's really pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, I thought that Kiefer was going to be a bigger deal in the movie, but
Hmm.
to my earlier point, right, it's an ensemble. It's everybody, you know? He's the leader of the pack, but a lot of those other boys get some screen time too. So it's not necessarily his show. Apparently he also didn't have that many lines, but he casts a big shadow over the whole movie, right? Because
You
if he's
mean
not really saying
Kiefer
all that
Kiefer
much,
Sutherland is dated?
yeah, Kiefer, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean he's Michael's the true quote unquote lead of the movie,
right,
but Kiefer's kind of like the face of the Lost Boys. Like
yeah,
his the poster with all of them, yes, iconic, but then most of the time what you always see is Kiefer's vampire face
yeah.
everywhere.
Here's a fun fact: he broke his wrist in this movie, apparently, and so at some point, riding a motorcycle, he fell off and broke his wrist. So there are some scenes where he's wearing a glove, and it's because his wrist was so badly bruised from it that he had to wear a glove. I can't hear you,
Fair.
hon.
That the Lost Boys was filmed very quickly.
Yeah, over like 20 days.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And then my
all
last
right,
fun fact. Oh, sorry.
go for
Go
it.
ahead.
No, no, go for it.
Oh, just my last fun fact, and it's really not all that fun, but Jason apparently was, not surprisingly, Joel Schumacher was really after him to be in this movie,
Mm,
and Jason turned it down 5 times before he finally said, "Yes, I'll do it," under the assumption or under the promise that he was not going to have to wear any of the vampire stuff, and obviously he did. So Joel kind of lied to him to get him in the movie, and we are all very thankful for that.
yeah, we really are. Thank you, Joel. You always come through for us. Um, so do you think you would recommend The Lost Boys to someone who's never seen it?
I would definitely add it to my Halloween my collection of Halloween movies. I actually owned it. I had never seen it, believe it or not. I had it from my movie stop days.
It's you knew that it was a classic of some kind. You were like,
I
it's a
did.
classic of some kind. I should have it.
Yeah, well, I love Halloween movies, and whether I watch them or not, I feel like I have to own them as part of like my identity. So
That's
that's kind
fair.
of why I bought it. Um, would I recommend it? Absolutely would recommend it. I would warn people who are maybe not big movie aficionados, like it's horror and it's comedy, so go in with an open mind. But I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I'm gonna also recommend it. Love The Lost Boys. It and I think it only really gets better every time you watch it because by then you already kind of know what to expect and you're gonna really pay attention to a lot of just the fun. Just like it's a movie that if you grew up in the 90s or the 2000s and you watched a lot of TV and a lot of like 90s and early 2000s teen stuff, you'll see a lot of that DNA in The Lost Boys of what eventually kind of set the tone for it. So
Source
absolutely
material for
recommend.
a lot of stuff, for sure.
Yeah, totally recommend The Lost Boys. Okay, so we're going to jump into what we've been watching lately. And what have you been watching?
Well, I have been nipples deep in the Menendez
Okay.
situation. I purposely waited to watch the Ryan Murphy Monster Show until I watched the new Netflix documentary. I wanted to know the facts before I saw the fiction, and I'm so glad I did. The documentary is fantastic. They're in it. They participated in it from jail. So
Okay.
it is their story in their words, right? Like what happened to them, why it happened to them, why they did what they did. It is an extraordinary piece of documentary film. So then I started the Ryan Murphy show, and I think we all know how I feel about Ryan Murphy. The hyper-sexualization, hyper-fictionalization of real stories just drives me up a wall. I love when he was doing American Horror Story and that stuff, but when he's taking real people's lives and fetishizing them and kind of making them hot and alluring and appealing, it gets very gray for me. That said, it's a fantastic show. The boys are beautiful. Cooper Koch, if he doesn't get an Emmy from this performance, because aside from the beauty, right? Like aside from how he looks and his brother looks, that boy is putting in a performance. Like you are glued to everything that he says, and when he's not saying it, it's just you see it in his eyes. So, he's doing a fantastic job. I haven't finished it. I'm about like 2 episodes from finishing it. It's not an easy watch. It's definitely like a little bit soul sucking. But it's set in the 80s. 89 is when the actual murders happen. And so it kind of takes us into like 92, 96, that kind of era. So it's kind of a period piece, and it feels weird to say that, the 90s is a period piece, but so far so good.
So what's interesting about the Menendez brothers is the problem when you do what you're describing in terms of like fetishizing like history and like this situation that happened, a lot of society tends to think of these things as true when they watch them in this form. You know what I mean? Like that's like a double-edged sword here in terms
Yeah.
of, because they do that with documentary too. And like documentary is, more closer to, it can be
Facts.
closer to factual.
Yeah.
But then when you're talking about turning these things into a TV show, like a fictionalized TV show, you start to play a really strange, dangerous game, because it's like the majority of the public is going to think that this is exactly what it was. And they're not going to really, put in the work to remember that it's fictionalized and not all of it is true.
Absolutely. And I remember the Menendez case. Like it was on the news every night. It was a big deal. And I think the way that I designed this viewing of watching the documentary, reacclimating myself to the facts, and then watching this is where I can now pinpoint where the liberties were taken in the show. And I'm all for creative liberties, right? Like, you've got to make it entertaining for people. I get all that, but I think Ryan Murphy really kind of pushes the envelope for some of this stuff. And I don't know if I co-sign that, right? Like, I think, and like, he got into like a lot of hot water with the Dahmer or not the Dahmer family, but like the victims of Dahmer when he did that series. And, I didn't watch that, so I can't speak to it. But I remember the backlash from the victims' families. Like, what are you doing? This guy was a freaking monster and you're sympathizing him. And like, I don't necessarily think that that's correct. I will say, in defense of the Ryan Murphy Monsters Menendez show, is that he does not shy away from the underlying sexual molestation that happened in that case, right? That is front and center the entire show. And not as an excuse, right? You should not kill anybody. But I think that was very underplayed in the reality of their trials and stuff like that. And so I think bringing that back has really, we are at a point now, I think, in society where we can kind of talk about those things and understand what happens in those situations.
Right. Like the government and the public of the early, late 80s, early 90s were not interested in hearing or sympathizing with male.
Absolutely not.
Male, two
Sexual
males
abuse.
who were sexually abused. Like that was not what this country was interested in doing.
No. And I would argue it's probably still raises an eyebrow or two. But I think it happens, right? And I think that that's what happened to these boys. And I think they, again, not an excuse, but I think a very big reason, a very, reason that contributed to their actions. So that's what I've been watching this week. Very not light, not my usual tea, but.
So Menendez Brothers, I won't be watching. Mostly because I don't watch those types of shows. I had someone ask me recently as well, like, "Oh, are you watching the Menendez Brothers show?" And I said, "No, it's not my thing." They're like, "Did you watch Dahmer?" And I said, "I watched a few episodes and then I just got bored." Yeah, and when I say I got bored, it doesn't mean it's not it doesn't mean it's boring. It just means like I don't do well with like true crime, overly heavy kind of stuff. Like it doesn't interest me.
Ditto. I watch stuff to escape, not to.
And I'm able to sit here and say that, like, technically, performance-wise, everyone's doing a great job. It's just not for me. And that goes back to that saying that I told you. I'm like, my new saying nowadays is, I know when something is for me, and when something is not for me.
I don't have to yuck your yum. It's just not
right.
For me.
Right. Like, just go enjoy that thing. Yep. Like, this person who asked me this, they're not watching 911, but I'm not grilling them about it. But of course, not everybody on Instagram and TikTok is talking about 911. So I'm a weirdo.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm a drag because I won't go rollerblading.
Okay, Brenda, calm down.
So I will, you know what? I've been watching a lot of stuff.
What a surprise.
But I mean, very strange things. Not strange. It's very much in line with the way I randomly watch things. So I've been watching a lot of Highlander, like
Oh,
the
okay.
original Highlander show, like the
Okay.
TV series starring Adrian Paul.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of that before bed. I'll put on some Highlander, and then the way I watch things before bed is like I'll put it on, and if it's time to go to sleep, I won't fall asleep to it. I'll pause it. I'll go to sleep, and then the next morning or later that
Catch
day,
up.
I'll keep going from the
Yep.
same spot. So I've been watching a lot of Highlander. Learned a lot about that production because you start watching something and then you start Wikipedia and you start maybe wanting to know a little
Well,
bit more.
not most people. I think you and I do that, but
I thought everybody did that.
no.
I thought everyone did that. You mean you're not watching something and you're like curious, like what went into making it?
I think 98% of people who watch things don't do that, AP. So
I feel so bad.
But it is our job to bring that information to the masses. So let me have it.
So the Highlander, the series, was a co-production in its first season between a studio based out of France and a studio based out of, I think, Canada.
Okay.
And for them to be able to secure their budget for the show from the Canadian government forced them to film a certain amount of the season in France. And then the other part of the season was being filmed in Canada, in Vancouver.
Okay.
And so the show, midway, has a storyline reason why Duncan needs to go to France. And then the rest of the season takes place in France, along with the rest of the characters from the main part of the show.
Well, good for that
Vancouver.
cast.
Right. And then that, I think, changes in season 2 because they're able to start securing more budget from other markets, so they don't have to rely on the French government money to fund it as much. But yeah, so I've been watching a lot of Highlander. Last night, very, very randomly, I decided to watch the pilot episode of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Oh, you're ticking my box here. Uh-huh.
I gotta say, it was really good.
Where is that streaming?
Dr. Quinn is streaming on Amazon Prime or the Freevee app.
Interesting. So my cousin Lily and I, in the 90s, literally, it was like appointment TV. We watched Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. It was on for 8 years, right?
Yeah,
like
it was on for a long time.
Yeah, it's got like a million seasons. Oh my God, we were obsessed.
So I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, growing up, I knew Dr. Quinn was a thing, and she was a punchline on a lot of different kind of comedic sketches. But I don't think I ever actually remember watching an episode. I'm sure I did. I just don't remember it.
Yeah.
So,
and her hunky husband or her hunky,
so hot.
Yep.
So hot. I think the actor's name was like Joe Lando, and in the show his name is Sully. Of course, I Wikipedia'd while I was watching it. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. It honestly felt very timely still. Like, I feel like that's a story that, like, not that I want it to be remade, but that story could very easily be a very popular television show today, I think.
Yeah. I haven't revisited it since we were watching it back then. That's why I was asking where it's streaming, because I would totally watch that again.
Check it out. It's on Freevee. Freevee's in the name. Freevee.
Yep. I love that show. It was Touched by an Angel, and
of course you did.
It was
of course you liked Touched by an Angel.
What was the boy version of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman? Walker, Texas Ranger. Oh my God.
The boy version of Dr. Quinn was Walker, Texas Ranger. He was not
you know the name, right? Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Walker, Texas Ranger. Like, everything was kind of named, like it was name and title. So
it was the sister series.
Yes. They had a crossover episode. There was a time machine.
Well, that pilot, the Dr. Quinn pilot, was an hour and a half. It was very long.
I think they were thinking it was going to be like a mini series more than like episodic at the beginning. I could be wrong, but I think that was the intention back then.
Well, and then through my findings, there is a Dr. Quinn, the movie.
Yeah.
that was made while the show was on the air, or maybe it came out after the show was on the air. But there is a movie called Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, the movie,
Yep.
that stars her and the husband character, and they go on like a movie style plot. I do not know what that is. And now the question is, will I keep watching it? I think I might. I don't know if I'm going to dedicate myself to like going through the season, but it was good. It was good.
If you want to make a commitment right here and there, we can both watch it together and have a debrief on some of the storylines. I would be about that. I was obsessed with that show.
I love that. And I did not know you would be obsessed, but I knew you would feel strongly about my choice. And I'll close it out with another. I'll bring back Ryan Murphy to bring it back around. I started randomly watching Grotesquerie.
Oh,
have you heard of this?
Yes, one of the Menendez actors is in that.
Is he?
Yeah, he's the priest.
I was gonna say, is he the priest that likes to?
Yep.
So the priest likes to like
mutilate himself.
Like do all that stuff. I randomly chose to watch Grotesquerie. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be really bad, actually, mostly because I haven't really enjoyed an American Horror Story season in a long time, and I think because I don't watch his Dahmer stuff and like those types of things, my mind's not really thinking like, oh, I'm gonna hate this because
I
don't know, but I really
is it part of American Horror Story?
So no, it isn't. But I saw a review that essentially said that Grotesquerie could just as easily be an American Horror Story season from the earlier days of American Horror Story, where the shows felt much more contained, like they were like they had a clear vision of what they wanted to do, whereas like later on it kind of goes off the rails.
Got it.
And I think what a statement like that says is that people really miss when American Horror Story was kind of like delivering
better,
because I don't actually think Grotesquerie matches that, but I get the sentiment. I get what they're trying to express with the sentiment. It's Niecy Nash. It's essentially Niecy Nash in the movie Seven.
Oh,
with really, really good neon lighting.
Fascinating.
So yeah, it's essentially the movie Seven. I would argue that the deaths that they show, like the gore type stuff, is pretty twisted.
So it's based on the 7 Deadly Sins?
No, I mean like just like the stuff. Well, I don't know yet. I haven't finished.
Okay.
I haven't finished yet. But when
he's a Catholic priest, he's full,
right. Like there's a lot of religious stuff going on in there. But it's in the sense like it's 7 because there's a serial killer and the serial killer is killing random people, and
she's a detective, right?
And she's a detective and she's really good, but she's also an alcoholic.
Got it.
And there's a really interesting dynamic with her and her daughter on the show. Her daughter is overweight and has a lot of issues with the mom, with Niecy Nash's character. And they both kind of enable each other with their vices, like the drinking, the overeating. Yeah. And they kind of hate each other over it, but they also kind of know that there's a power for certain things. So they use that against them to kind of keep staying in their cycle. It's really toxic.
Interesting.
And the show genuinely manages to be a little suspenseful. And it also has Travis Kelce, Mr. Taylor Swift's first acting role.
How's that going?
I thought he did fine. He did fine. What takes you out of it more isn't the fact that it's Travis Kelce or that his acting is, just subpar. It's the fact that like you don't see people that are that like he has a fade on, like, he has a fade haircut, and obviously he has that perfectly lined out beard and then the great teeth and just, the Travis Kelce of it all.
Yeah.
It's a little strange to see someone like that on camera saying a lot of like really flowery kind of real dialogue.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes any sense. It's just like most actors like have normal hair. They don't have like these very trendy haircuts.
Okay.
They don't have like these very trendy haircuts while they're also trying to like, I don't know.
But it's not a period piece, right? It's set in modern times.
It's set in modern times, but I don't know. He's the only person that looks like he could be like, it's me just thinking of it as Travis Kelce, and that's why it's so strange.
So he's just too hot to really speak, is what you're saying.
I guess, yeah. I guess it's, yeah. He doesn't look like he fits in the world of what they're showing me, but
That's fair. That's fair.
yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that's what I've been watching. There you go. It's a lot.
That's a lot. I mean, I've only managed one documentary in like 5 episodes, and you've watched like 13 shows.
No, I watched like 1 hour of each show. There's a difference. There's a difference.
Cool.
All right. So I think we are done with this one, and we will be back next week.
See ya.
Bye, guys.